Welcome to Perfection, Nevada. Population 14.
Okay, let's give it a try.
This will be our start point for this take.
The setting for Tremors, a new film starring Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward.
Action.
In the town of Perfection, which is kind of a very sleepy cowboy town in the middle of the desert, there's not a lot that's happened over the last, 4,000 or 5,000 years.
Hey, Mindy, what's the count?
640!
And all of a sudden, something hits this little town that no one has any kind of explanation for.
They're coming!
Tremors is a different kind of monster movie.
Run, run!
One with a sense of humor.
There we go!
Unlike recent monster films, Tremors tips its hat to the classic films of another era.
Wait, look out!
I think it has some similarities to the monster movies of the 50s in that, you have something that is frightening, but at the same time surrounded by certain levity.
And you got to get the police up here. You got to step on it.
Consider it stepped on.
A monster movie, I'd find that usually the monster is the main character and that the other people are just kind of heroic and supporting. But both of these characters, Val and Earl, they're, in spite of themselves, called upon to save the day.
Must be a million of them. Come on.
The last thing in the world they want to do is get off their butts and battle monsters.
We can make it!
They're not really heroic types, which to me are the most fun kind of heroes to see.
We could get in People magazine.
People? Hell. National Geographic.
Tremors features Michael Gross, star of Family Ties, as tough-as-nails survivalist Burt Gummer.
Survivalists believe that the world is going to come to an end as they know it.
And cut.
And so when the dark stuff hits the fan, they're going to be prepared.
What do you think? Max firepower this.
I go for penetration, the 458, shooting solids, less ammo to carry.
Bert probably is someone who takes himself probably a little more seriously than other people do in the piece.
What kind of fuse is that?
Cannon fuse.
What the hell you use it for?
A cannon.
Just because he's a serious guy. It doesn't mean he's not funny, because I think the fact that he takes himself so seriously is one of the things that makes him funny.
Hey, Mark. Action.
The phone's out, the road's out. We're on our own.
All right.
Come on,
Bert joins forces with the town's inhabitants to battle the ravenous creatures.
Any of those snake things show up here, we make them extinct.
We don't know what these things first look like or how they operate. We don't know what we're dealing with. You prepare yourselves, you arm, set perimeters, patrol. In other words, you wait for them to come to you and then blast them away when they do. He doesn't realize at that point how formidable his opponents are. This is the moment where Bert confronts the fear he's always been expecting. This is the moment he's been preparing for. And I guess this is where it all comes down. Self-preservation, that's what it's about right now.
It all began with my friends, Brent, Maddock, and Steve Wilson, a number of years ago. It's been over 10 years now, that we wanted to make a movie together. We had been making educational films together, and Steve had this wacky idea that he called Land Shark.
The very original idea for Tremors, the fragment that kicked it all off, I came up with a number of years ago when I was working for the Navy. I was editing films for the Navy, but I was doing this out in the middle of the desert in California, where they have a base where they test things. And on the weekends I would go off and wander around out on the ranges when they weren't shooting at them. And I was climbing rocks one day, and I was sitting up on a rock, and I made a note and scrap of paper. What if there was something under the ground and I couldn't get off this rock? And that note just sat in a file folder then for a number of years. And later, Brent and I sold Short Circuit, and our agent, Nancy Roberts, sat us down and said, okay, now, get all those old ideas out of your file folders. And we got a number of them out, and she picked about 3 of them to really pursue and develop, and one of them was what we then started calling Land Sharks. After that time, actually, Saturday Night Live started doing the character Land Shark, so we dispensed with that title, that working title. And then it just went through many permutations after that.
And we took the idea around to various studios and pitched it. And people would stare at us blankly and like, what what kind of movie would this be with underground monsters that we called graboids? They didn't quite get it. It's because it's a tonal balancing act too. It was a hard movie to describe in a short paragraph or two. So Nancy encouraged Brent and Steve to write the screenplay so that we would have something on paper to actually show people that we did have an idea about what this movie would be like. And Nancy took it to Gail Ann Hurd, who executive produced the movie, and she responded to the material immediately, and she came out of low-budget filmmaking as we all did, so she really understood that we knew how to make this kind of movie. And the idea for the movie came from a very low-budget idea to take a monster that's invisible most of the movie because it's underground. And so we, with Gail, we went to Universal Studios, and overnight, literally, they said yes.
Since this was our first feature, we really, Steve and I as producers, we were involved with everything, with casting, with finding the locations, with the costumes, with really every aspect of the film.
We bugged everybody about everything.
Yeah, and it was fun. And I mean, Ron was great too. Ron was really gracious in having us be involved in a way that a lot of directors would not allow, producers to be. So it was fun. It was a real collaboration, and it worked well. And I think one of the things we had to learn in the process of making the film was there was only so far we could go. I think at some point you got to step back and let Ron direct the movie.
Yeah.
One of the first people that Gail Ann Hurd introduced me to in this film was our production designer, the person we had as our production designer, Ivo Cristante, and he became just such a phenomenal asset for the making of the movie. He brought so much in terms of his designs and he's also a wonderful, has great mechanical effects knowledge also. So he was very instrumental in the creation of the buildings and the sets to work in a effects way, which was great.
We found a location south of Lone Pine, about 30 miles south of Lone Pine. And it turned out great. Ivo Cristante, our production designer, went in there with typical enthusiasm and built this whole town and made it look old. We even paved a little section of this tiny little dirt road that was there.
I mean, absolutely everything was built.
And Ivo had 2 months to build this entire town. And he had a great crew. They worked very quickly. And he designed the centerpiece of the town. Pham Van's store was originally called, later changed to Chang's when we cast a Chinese actor instead of a Vietnamese actor. And it was built to collapse and go back together immediately for take 2, which was a really wonderful design where the roof could fall apart and we could take it apart in stages as much as we wanted. It was really ingenious and simple. As most of the effects in this movie were kind of simple. The movie was made with bulldozer technology, and we tried to make everything as sort of simple and foolproof as possible. However, most of the effects didn't work the first time, as with most effects movies.
When we got out there to make Tremors, the three of us together, the experience was, it was amazing to find out the experience was the same. Making an $11 or $12 million feature was the same experience as making a $20,000 educational film. We didn't have enough money, we didn't have enough time, and we were basically sort of, winging it, as we went along.
Solving difficult problems in the same way.
Yeah.
Winging it's not quite right. We had elaborate storyboards and we had planned it out, but things nevertheless go wrong, and that's when you rely on your experience to solve them.
Yeah. One of the big nightmares, effects-wise, for the film was the sinking of the car. It was the last night of photography, and we were running out of night, and the the car, we had a water pit, basically, that was filled with vermiculite, this dirt-like substance, and the vermiculite just absorbed water like crazy, and it became solid like ground, and we could not get that car to sink down into it. The sequence was storyboarded to go a little farther. The actress was going to kick the windshield out and get up on the bumper, and she's going down on the ship as it's sinking, screaming out into the night up on the bumper, and we just couldn't ever get to that part of the scene because we couldn't get the car to go down, first of all. So it was a very frustrating night. One of the effects that worked the first time and every time that was one of my favorites in the film was when the jackhammer pierces the graboid and it shoots across through the pavement, across the roadway. And that was actually done in a very simple way with a track that was laid under the ground, and the jackhammer was set into that track, and then the track was covered with an asphalt, very soft asphalt look that just broke away as the jackhammer was pulled. Another one that actually worked, though, was the moving hump that went throughout the desert and was racing toward Kevin Bacon at the end of the film at the cliff. And that was a simple technique that was just a trough dug by a tractor out in the desert, and we put a boat buoy in the trough, covered the whole trough with a dirt mat, and then pulled it with a truck, pulled this buoy around, and it really gave the sense of the moving hump of this creature.
I'm Rhonda Lebeck. I'm up here for the semester.
Yeah, geography.
Geology.
Yeah, well, actually, seismology. Earthquakes. And you two must be Val and Earl. I've heard all about you.
We deny everything.
Kevin, I loved his work from the time of Animal House and Diner, and certainly Footloose. He really carried that movie off so well, and he obviously was an actor who had a sense of humor, but also was very real, and that's what we were looking for in Fred. I loved him from The Right Stuff and Escape from Alcatraz. The film that I thought actually showed me Fred was so right for this more than anybody was Euphoria. A little scene film, but he played a character in it that I just thought, whoa, this guy is Earl. Earl Bassett needs to be played by Fred Ward. And we were so lucky that he immediately responded to the script, and he and Kevin it was a match made in heaven. Finn Carter was someone who came in to read for the part. I really wasn't familiar with her work, but she just blew us away. Michael Gross was the last person I would have thought for originally for Burt Gummer at the time, because he had been playing the father on Family Ties at that time. He had just done the FBI Murders, but I hadn't seen that TV movie that showed a very different side of Michael. Very different from Tremors as well, but it showed that certainly this actor has a great range, and he came in to read for the part, which we were lucky to get someone of his caliber to come in and want to read for the part. And once again, I was so blown away by his performance, and he was jumping up on the couch, standing on the table in the room, and it was just wonderful. I believed this movie. I believed The Survivalist when I heard him read, and so there was no doubt he was the guy for the role. And Reba McEntire was someone who the executives at Universal, Jim Jackson, Casey Silver, said, there's this country singer, Reba McEntire, you probably know her, she wants to get into the movies. I thought, oh my God, that's the last thing I need is a non-actress for the movie, because this is my first movie and I really wanted good actors in all the parts. But I said, if she'll come out and read for us, I mean, there's no reason not to read her. And she flew herself out to LA, and I fell in love when she walked through the door. She was so engaging and so wonderful. you could just tell her natural style would lend itself to the role of Heather Gummer. Alexander Grzinski was the director of photography on the film, and we wanted a kind of warm feeling throughout, and to picture perfection as, although kind of run down and it had seen better days, it was kind of a romantic place. We really only have two interiors in the movie, the store and Bert and Heather's basement. And it's a real challenge for a director of photography to be outside all the time and be at the mercy of the elements.
1, 2, 3.
And my editor, Nick Brown, was always there to give encouragement, but also to say when something wasn't working well. He was always brutally honest, and I love that about Nick. He went on to cut City Slickers and Heart and Souls for me as well. An action sequence is really made in the cutting room out of many little pieces of both first unit and second unit photography. Steve Wilson directed the excellent second unit with Virgil Harper as the director of photography.
Look, these creatures are absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah, but where do they come from?
That was a big question, though, where the creatures came from. And people kept asking. I mean,
well, they insisted.
There was a debate about that.
There was a big debate about it early in the process. First of all, we didn't care. And since I'm the one who comes out of science fiction films, I was saying there's only 4 places they can come from. They're either radioactive, or they're a biological experiment, or they're from outer space, or they've always been there. This is the only options you have. So I didn't want to say, and I said, in fact, I'll go one better. Let's just say all of them.
Doesn't matter where they come from.
Yeah. When we first got involved with Gail Ann Hurd, she had worked with these makeup effects guys who turned out to be brilliant and a godsend for the making of Tremors, Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff.
I think in the script, they went so far as to describe that they have multi-pieced mouths and these snake-like tentacle tongues that come out. And beyond that, we were sort of given some free rein. Whenever we're designing a creature, even if it's some kind of a fantastic monster, we really like to go to research books of real animals, looking at forms and details like skin texture, coloring, even the way an animal moves, and so it has some sort of basis in reality. If there's no reality, if it's all completely made up, completely fantastic, there's sort of an unreal quality to it that's hard to get over. So we would meet with Steve and Brent and Ron, and at the time we were sort of just getting our own shop established, and we didn't really have a base of operations. We would meet with them at a restaurant in Burbank and show up with a pile of books under our arm, sit down, spread them all out all over the table, and sit and drink coffee and go through these books and come up with a design.
They would say, when do we get to come and see your shop? And we'd say, well, this was more convenient for all of us, sort of a halfway point. And so, ultimately we did have to say, we're making some arrangements, as soon as you give us the check, then you can come over. And it was pretty tight there for a while.
They needed to be able to move fast, and they needed to hunt by sound, and they needed to be big enough to eat a number of people, so you didn't think, well, gee, you ought to be full by now. And beyond that, there were certain sort of obvious things, the cigar shape, and we did come up with the idea of the spikes on the sides, that we felt like this is how they would push them. I had read somewhere that earthworms push themselves with these stiff hairs on their sides, so I thought, okay, we'll incorporate that.
Yeah, it must push itself along with these. All of them pushing at once. That's why it moves so fast.
I really wanted something different in the mouth, but I didn't go much beyond that. There's a line in the script, and you can probably find it. It says something about the mouth opens like a grotesque flower.
So we started thinking about that and thinking that kind of implies almost a bending kind of muscular action. And what we did not want to do was repeat what had been done in Dune. Because in Dune, they sort of, the sandworms were like earthworms, sort of more muscular, and they seemed to be kind of like a long muscular tube rather than anything with a skeletal structure or armor plating and so on. So we decided that the tact we would take would be as realistic a standpoint as possible, that if a creature were to be swimming through sand or dirt, it would need a pointed armored head so that it could push that matter away, and then the rest of the body then would have some sort of muscular action. But the idea was that they would speed through the dirt like killer whales.
For the tentacles, we had mechanical versions of those. I think we had 3 full-length mechanical versions, and then we had a slightly shorter version, which we called our attack tentacle, that had a little tighter control over it. And that was the one that we always had leaping at Kevin Bacon, or just barely missing him when it was coiling around and trying to strike. Art Brewer was the special effects supervisor on the show, and he built a hydraulic rig that would bring our worm puppets up from underground. And the way we get a clean break is to have a big styrofoam sheet of textured ground material that it was easy to break through, and then there was a lot of loose dirt and big air cannons to kick up dirt and dust. And for one of the shots, because we wanted to have the creatures have a lot of life when they're bursting up, I went inside one of the creatures that was basically suspended like a big cone shape on these heavy-duty springs, and I was underneath, and I had a little respirator mask on, and I had a walkie-talkie and a little flashlight, and basically was camping out under there.
Walter Chang Gets Eaten was an example of where we really overlapped with Art Brewer. We had to create an effect where a worm bursts right up through the floorboards and snatches a guy and thrashes him around and pulls him right down. So we had our worms that we had used out in the desert, and we knew basically how those needed to work. But the challenge here was to get up enough speed that we could bring it up and break through the breakaway floorboards and so on. Make that happen in the soundstage, which had like a water tank. I think it was a water tank, but it was a pretty narrow corridor that dropped down about 10 feet. So what Art came up with was a track that a dolly rode on with a boom arm on it, and we mounted our worm on the end of that boom arm, and about 10 of us pushed that dolly as fast as we could, and then levered the arm up right at the last minute, so we got a lot of good speed and upward momentum.
1, 2, 3, action!
And we got the initial burst through, and we had guys on the cables pulling the jaws open so it would open up. And then in a separate cut, we showed the tentacles coming out, wrapping around Walter Chang, and starting to pull him back. We had a bicycle seat rigged inside the mouth of the creature so that the actor could sit on that comfortably inside the gullet. And I think he was about up to his chest or his waist or so. And we had a fake leg that we made for him that stuck out the side of the creature so that it would look like things had just been broken into an awkward way, and that it looked like one leg was swollen and the other leg was broken and pushed out through the front, and we had the tentacles wrapped around him.
Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch!
We had just come off of Aliens recently, and we had said to ourselves, Aliens was a dark movie. Everything was wet in it and slimy. This seems to be more about, broad daylight, hot dust. Let's stay away from the slime. Let's just let them be, a little drier and create their own character that way. That's a little different than what you usually see. And we didn't slime up the mouth. We let it. It was glossy because of the coatings that we had put on it, but it was dry. And we saw it in the dailies, and the editor had remarked that it looked kind of like it was painted with nail polish, and we kind of didn't fully understand that comment, but understood what he was reacting to, which was the lack of wetness. So we started putting the slime on it and started doing the webbing in between the mouth, so that by the time we got to the point where the dead creature had rammed into that retaining wall, and they break it away and the head kind of lolls out, and there's a POV shot where the camera's moving and all this dripping slime and all that. I mean, we really went overboard with the wetness there, and we saw it at a test screening with a bunch of guys, like heavy metal guys, with Metallica t-shirts and all that, guys that would really eat that up. And when they saw all that dripping slime, the whole place, it was like the roof went off the theater, everybody was cheering, and we looked at each other and we said, slime. We also did a lot of guts. We would provide the intestines of the creatures to the physical effects crew, and they would load them into their air mortars or, you know, whatever their charges were to blow them sky high. And we had guts for shots where people were, you know, pelted by a storm of guts, which was a pretty funny moment in the script where the obnoxious kid gets whacked in the face by a big piece of intestine. And we made those, a lot of those were made out of cotton batting stuffed into pantyhose and soaked in our methylcell slime, orange-tinted methylcell slime. We also got some pumpkin pie filling, and filled it up, you know, for an extra little squishy, splatty effect. And those started to, you know, decompose and rot, and they'd really start smelling like real intestines.
My role on Tremors was as director of photography, and in most of the work that we do, I'm the director of photography, and will direct the action at certain times when my brother isn't directing the action. He art directs, and I'm the director of photography. During Tremors, there was a lot of very difficult lighting challenges in very specific areas that, as a director of photography, I had to deal with. And among them were matching to the live action's lighting, which in a lot of cases was the sun, was outdoor sunlight, which is a challenge.
It was so hot, and we were shooting in the summer. I remember it was 109 outside, and one particular day we were shooting, and I had to squeeze up behind the back of the set and work on the backdrop. Now, there was enough light there that my shirt actually started smoking from the heat. And at that point, where I almost scorched myself, I said, you know, we're going to start working at night. So we started coming in the evening and working through the night, and the rest of that job was shot at night when it was much cooler outside, because we could not tolerate the heat on the set from our lights combined with the outside temperature.
Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff's company built the creature miniatures for the film. The Forward built the miniatures of the basement interior and all the desert terrain, all the exteriors, all of the desert, which sounds sort of strange to build the desert, but in fact things had to be constructed, and there were backdrops that had to be painted, and there were the sagebrush and bush and cactus that had to be built, and all that to match live action. In the basement sequence, when the creature breaks through the wall into the survivalists' little into their basement and starts destroying their room, the full-sized creature was used to break through the wall. It was determined that to get all of the shots that were necessary, we had to do it in miniature. For example, there's a scene where the worm swings up and hits into the ceiling of the basement and breaks some ceiling tiles off. In that particular scene, that was done as a miniature, as a quarter-scale basement that was built fully to match the live action set. And in that case, we were again able to do the things that the full-size couldn't do. The full-sized worm was not quite as long as that, and would never reach up that far that fast to do it, and that's where we were able to help them out.
The one thing we didn't have in our location of our needs was this cliff, this huge cliff face for the end of the movie, and set up at the beginning of the movie. And so we went to Illusion Arts, a matte painting company, and they did an incredible job at creating this the illusion that there were these cliffs at one end of the valley. And we relied on that, as well as the miniature cliffs at the end, which the creature actually burst through.
At the end of the film, the payoff, the creature dies at the end of the film, and he crashes through the cliff and lands on the ground and splats, and he's dead. We had to create a miniature version of that cliff for our purposes. We did it as a perspective shot, and a perspective shot is pretty straightforward, kind of a simple concept, and what it is you build something that's smaller than the real object, and then you put something behind it and line the two up with the right camera angle, and it looks as though it's larger than it actually is. So you're bringing a small object, putting it close to the camera, and putting people into it further away, and it looks like it's an actual full-size cliff.
When we were shooting the miniature cliff at the end for the ending, the creature bursting out of the wall of the cliff, we had doubles for each of the actors because they had to be way up on a scaffolding high above this miniature cliff with a forced perspective to think that they were standing on this cliff. And we were waiting and waiting for the female stunt double to arrive, Rhonda's stunt double, and she never showed up. So there were no women there actually in that day of photography. So I got drafted in and had a wig put on, and I played Rhonda for that scene. But finally, I cut myself out of the movie because that shot was not necessary. So we ended up leaving it on the floor. But for a brief time, I played Rhonda in the movie, yes.